Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce Lamott, conductor of the Philharmonia Chorale, and I must say that is a really tough act to follow, but it certainly gives us a taste of what's in store for us today in what will be our last performance in this set of Caroline Shaw's The Listeners. And if previous performances are any measure, you are in for a real transport of delight. The first night I spoke with a couple of people at the reception afterwards, mostly opera crowd, and two different people used the word "I was transported." And I think that Caroline would really like that. You know, we are a period instrument orchestra, and we pride ourselves on being historically informed performers. And so it's very rare that hip performers actually get the chance of speaking to a living composer, because most of our career is divining what long-dead composers in different performing traditions have accepted as the norms for performance. So having Caroline Shaw with us for a week, not having to divine what she meant in the score, but saying, is this what you wanted? And then, of course, that wonderful thing where it wasn't what she wanted, and she changed it right then and there. It was a wonderful kind of interplay. I also want to say that the other thrill of the week was a one-time visit from Timothy Ferris, who was the producer of the Voyager Golden Record, now emeritus from UC Berkeley. And not only did he and Carl Sagan develop and produce and conceive of this golden record, but also now it is available on LP, and it happens to have been engineered by Timothy Ferris's son, who's a rock musician in LA. Along those lines, you will hear at one point the voice of Carl Sagan's 6-year-old son in the greeting portion. I won't tell you any more about that. So anyway, we're opening with two very exceptional commissions with two very different fates. I'm not going to talk too much about the glorious birthday ode for Queen Anne that she never heard, because she played cards that day and had gout and went back to bed. If you've seen The Favorite, it's that Queen Anne. And so we're not even sure that that piece ever was performed. There is no record of it having been performed after Handel wrote it, but it was one of those occasional pieces where the poet laureate came up with a poem and Handel came up with this glorious music, and it was clearly rehearsed, and then who knows. The commission, however, with Caroline Shaw was a completely different thing, and it was not a specific occasion. She had been terrifically successful with our previous Philharmonia commissions, which are now going to be on a CD with this work. The songs, including Red, Red Rose, sung by Anne-Sophie von Otter. And so this is a kind of landmark in her meteoric, if we may use the word, career. It's the longest piece she's ever written. And she was basically given the parameters: write something big, including the chorale and the orchestra, period instruments, and our chorale. And we're really fortunate because she is both a Baroque violinist. Right now, because she's not here, she's actually playing the Mendelssohn octet with a string quartet back in the East. So she's a performing violinist of considerable ability. She's also a professional singer. And those qualities in this work have made it a delight both to perform and to prepare. And so what I would like to do is depart from my usual, here's a little sampler plate, you'll be hearing it soon enough, but to just kind of give you an idea of what was behind the work, and then to give you an opportunity really to read with me the extraordinary poetry that you'll find in your program starting on page 38. Just a little bit of background. She was inspired for this cosmic work by the Voyager spacecraft, which you may remember in 1977 was sent, or there were two of them, sent out into, at that point, the heliosphere. And normally with other spacecraft, there was usually a plaque that says, made in America or something. And Carl Sagan and Timothy Ferris got this idea, well, what if we put something on there that's representative of our planet? And that devolved into a long-playing record at half speed, which included everything from the second Brandenburg Concerto to Glenn Gould to Beethoven to Chuck Berry, as well as photographs, greetings in 55 languages, living and dead. An amazing sort, as Carl Sagan describes it, a sort of message in a bottle to the universe. And it was pressed on a copper record and then encased in gold, as durable as it could possibly be, with instructions on how to play it. Now, I don't know if you've been to IKEA. I don't know that an alien getting those kind of instructions would be able to do that. But in any event, she, sort of thinking about this, comes up with this idea of an oratorio, at least in its large anatomy, which really divides itself right down the middle. And if you're looking at page 38 and 39, you'll see that it opens with a prologue, and like a good Baroque work, it is architecturally symmetrical. There is a prologue and an epilogue using the same music. It's thematically connected. And interestingly, that first word for us, it is basically a one-word movement, which is the Spanish word for I shine, brillas. And I think what this points out about Caroline Shaw is she recognizes that singers convey more than words. And in fact, we wordlessly, I wish I were singing with them, wordlessly convey the spirit of the work with some incredible harmonies, some very powerful chord progressions, some remarkable playing in the orchestra without words, just with vowels. It's almost, again, the last thing that those aliens are going to understand of our culture is our language. And the first thing, if they ever heard this work, that they would hear would be our harmony. Then she moves to Walt Whitman with, I think, one of the most wonderful closing lines: let your soul stand cool and composed before a million universes. And here you're going to hear Caroline, the violinist, appear. There's going to be an intricate kind of tapestry or texture of the violins all playing all four strings. We've been having a discussion about whether this is bariolage or not, where I'm going to call it that. Rocking back over open strings and harmonics. And you say, well, why open strings? Why harmonics? Well, that's going to be the purest sound that you're going to get out of the violin. Those perfectly tuned fifths and octaves. And as they answer one to another, you get a sort of texture that just kind of undulates under these beautiful words. She uses pizzicato very effectively. She says she did not use her favorite kind of pizzicato, which is a slap pizzicato, because it makes the Baroque gut strings go immediately out of tune. I think another thing about her writing that is so important, and you heard a little bit in here, is her simplicity. She really not only writes to the players, but she writes to the audience, and she gives us, as I will point out in a moment, time to sort of catch up, which is really important as we listen. We are going to hear Kurt Waldheim and the first greeting from Earth on what she calls vintage for her vintage. For us, it was the latest technology. That is some of us, my generation, the long playing record and the cassette tape. I should point out that by the time that she was born, the Voyager spacecraft had already left the heliosphere and was already out into interstellar space, where it remains to this day. There's a kind of rhythmic continuity to the whole piece, sometimes as simple as a simple timpani stroke or a simple pizzicato in the strings. At other times, there's a kind of busyness that only reflects those kind of views of the galaxy where there's just too much to take in. There's the dissonances that are created here are not to assault our ears, but sort of to present us with this kind of multiplicity of viewpoints of all kinds of things that we can scarcely take in. And then she goes back to a contemporary of Shakespeare, a Scotsman, a laird, William Drummond of Hawthornden, who I'd never heard of, but who writes a beautiful poem that sort of twists in the middle, sort of like this work. And that is, it begins with some vocal arabesques from Avery Amaro, entranced with sad and curious eyes, and the earth's pilgrims are contemplating the heavens. But by the time it ends, oh no, to blast our pride the heavens do threat. In other words, we contemplate the heavens, and then there is this realization, oh, but what if the heavens are looking back at us? And we really, by comparison, do not matter. In dust now must our greatness buried lie, yet it is comfort with the world to die. So there is this extraordinary poem, and she drew this anthology of poetry. I don't know how many, I never got the chance to ask her, how many poems did you reject before you came up with these? Because one just seems to lead on to the next. There's a kind of inexorable beat and pulse to the next movement by Lord Tennyson, and Dashawn Burton is singing in a kind of parlando, almost like a Gregorian chant style or recitative style. And here I want to point out that she is very grounded in what we do, and said so, that there are references throughout this work to Baroque music, to early music, to textures. You will hear the harpsichord used very prominently. You will hear kind of Vivaldi meets Steve Reich kind of moments of kind of motoric rhythms. And then when we get to this last line, what is it all but a trouble of ants in the gleam of a million suns? There is this swarm of pizzicatos, again, of word painting, but not like Handel. And once again, we'll go back to the opening piece, the birthday ode, where over and over the choir sings about the lasting peace that Queen Anne brings to Europe. And every time Handel hits the word lasting, or losting, as we would say it, he either gives the singer a 2.5 measure sustained note, or about a 2.5 measure sustained coloratura of passage work. And once again, very, very literal word painting, as was the Baroque. Here, it's a much different sort of thing. And she catches the essence of the poetry. We hear Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot speech, on which he later wrote, that was a title of a book, and immediately following a poem that was just written 2 years ago. And it is as current as yesterday's newspaper, by the Afro-Latina poet who lives in Harlem, a young woman, Yesenia Montilla, about maps. And we go from the pale blue dot to the pale blue borders of the maps, and then clearly to a couple who has been separated by the borders that we have put on that pale blue dot. My favorite moment is the 8th movement with a poem by Lucille Clifton, another African-American woman, which occupies really the place of the Bach chorale in the middle of a cantata. It is almost a cappella. She has set this text incredibly sensitively, simply note for note in the scansion of English. And one of the things that is another hallmark of her style, which you already heard in this quartet, is the fact that she knows that the listener is always behind when we're listening to music, and she gives us time to catch up. In the string quartet, I hope you found yourself kind of connecting the dots in the silences. She kind of gives you the beginning of the phrase, and you can pretty well finish the sentence. Well, this is one of those pieces which is punctuated by rhetorical silence in which not only we follow what the singers are singing, but we catch up with the meaning of the text. It's absolute magic. And then as a complete contrast, we are thrown back into the heavens. It's almost like one of those fast-forward things where we are headed back for Earth in Pulsar, which is this I don't want to say cacophony because it's very highly organized, but of a multiplicity of very complex repeated rhythms. She loves repeated ostinatos, both rhythmically, repeated patterns, and also melodically. And here we hear the trumpets kind of hurtling by. We hear all kinds of activity going on in the violins. The oboes are getting in there, the timpani are getting in there, and there's just, as it's called, pulsar. It is the antithesis to what the choir just sang, and it sort of gives us that telescope view of the Milky Way, which I think is really important for us to think of. Once again, it kind of locates us on the pale blue dot. When you think of the pale blue dot, don't think of that beautiful Earthrise picture. He's talking about the look of Earth from interstellar space, in which the pale blue dot is about 2 pixels wide. And that's all it is in the midst of all of the universe. We end as we began, with return to a single word and a beautiful vocalese, and I hope, like everyone else, that you will feel transported. The place that Handel, I think, and Caroline Shaw are together, there's that often told story of Handel. At the premiere of Messiah, someone tried to compliment him on the noble entertainment he had just presented, and Handel says, "I should be sorry if I only entertained them. I wish to make them better." I think this piece will make us all better. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you for coming.